2001: A Space Odyssey is a 1968 sci-fi film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick. The screenplay, written by Kubrick and Arthur C. Clarke, was partially inspired by Clarke's short story, The Sentinel. In looking at movies by Richard Barsham and David Monahan, editing is referred to as the basic creative force of filmmaking, the process of selecting, arranging, and assembling the essential components of a movie, visual sound, and special effects to tell a story in a unique way. Looking more into Chapter 8 in the book, Barsham and Monahan talk about ellipses. They describe it as the most common manipulation of time through editing. An ellipsis is an omission between one thing and another, and in film, it generally signifies the omission of time, which was a key factor in A Space Odyssey, because there were a few significant leaps in time that happened with no other backstory. From the discovery of the monolith by the apes, then forwarding to the discovery on the moon, the transitions felt longer in part one of the film. In an article by Roger Ebert in 1968, he wrote that Kubrick himself had speculated that his film wouldn't have much luck with audiences raised on linear movies, that is, on movies that follow a plotted storyline from beginning to end. In a linear movie, you never ask why John Wayne wants to kill the bad guys, although perhaps you should. But in Kubrick's movie, there are questions harder to answer. What about that enormous black monolith, for example, which follows man through Kubrick's universe? In an article on Entertainment Weekly, Owen Gleiberman compares the film Gravity to A Space Odyssey, saying, "You'll almost surely be reminded of 2001: A Space Odyssey, because what Cuarón echoes from Kubrick's great film, and what still seems haunting and novel in an outer space movie, is the creeping rhythm of space, the anti-gravity that places everything in a trance, turning the action into a kind of moment-to-moment, semi-slow motion, a feeling of life suspended." In Chapter 9 of Looking at Movies, Barsham and Monahan talk about sound. Sound in scenes can operate on both physical and psychological levels. In the case of A Space Odyssey, since there is not a lot of dialogue, sound, and sometimes lack thereof, is used to amplify the story. Sound and silence were both used equally eerily. From the complete silence when a scene was focused on the emptiness of space, to Hal becoming assertive, sound was uniquely used when dialogue was not a major factor. In an article in The Words of the Lost Penguin, the author says 2001: A Space Odyssey is arguably the first film to use sound design in the way that we understand it today. Although the term itself would not be coined for another 11 years, in relation to Walter Murch's work on Apocalypse Now, and perhaps is nearer to the preceding term of sound montage, the overall vision of the sound in music as it combines with the visuals is nonetheless recognizable as sound design. In an article in Sounding Out Film, the author writes that, even in the era of silent movies, the piano accompaniment drew its music from orchestral music, popular song, and operas to enhance the visual action. It became the norm for supporting classic Hollywood narrative. Kubrick violates this expectation.